So that's the deal with this entire Harry eliminated from succession narrative. It just did not happen. Not today, not yesterday, not in any sort of formal fashion that anyone can point to with an actual piece of paper. But the reason we are all hearing about it right now, the reason it is lighting up every corner of the internet, is that the version of events being pushed is not really about a legal change. It's about something far more interesting. This is about a narrative that's been growing for years. A narrative where every private family hurt becomes official language. And the line between what really happened and what seems genuine to us emotionally has become so blurred that people are responding to the feeling as if it were a proven reality. And that's when it becomes weird, to be perfectly honest. Let's start with what is being described here in this whole scenario. Because take away the dramatic music and the palace intrigue jargon and you have a claim that King Charles sat down, opened a sealed document, picked up a pen, and permanently deleted Prince Harry from the line of succession. But it didn't suspend him, didn't stop him, took him away for good with no way back. And all of this apparently transpired in some secret room with Camilla observing in silence, William being told separately, and Catherine preparing herself for the blowback. It's portrayed as if it's a fait accompli, as if the ink is dry and Harry simply doesn't know it yet. But here's the problem with all of that. The king can't merely knock someone out of the line of succession with a pen in a private room. It's not like pulling somebody out of a will. The succession is fixed by law, not by the wishes of the monarch. It was created by the Act of Settlement in 1701 and amended by the Succession to the Crown Act in 2013. And it can only be altered by Parliament, not by Charles, not by a sealed folder, not by a senior aide stepping up with a second note. That's not how any of this is done. So right off the bat, the primary idea doesn't even pass the straight-face test. But what's interesting about this whole issue is not that the legal claim is wrong, because so many people want it to be true or think it should be true or have decided it's figuratively true even if it hasn't actually happened yet. And the real story here is that, not what Charles signed, but why the idea of Charles signing something has grown so plausible that it circulates without a pause for constitutional mechanics. This particular account of events didn't just pop into existence. Let's talk about where it seems to come from. The whole incident, the private showdown after a Windsor memorial ceremony, Harry uttering something that stopped everyone cold, the top-secret memo a courtier kept, Charles taking off his glasses, the remark that altered everything. It's all taken from a very specific well of royal reporting that's been out there for years. The Windsor Memorial Service detail looks to be referring to either Prince Philip's funeral in 2021 or even the 2022 Platinum Jubilee Thanksgiving ceremony. They were both instances when Harry was there and the tension was said to be intense. Several reports have claimed that Harry lobbied for a position closer to the family structure and asked for the reinstatement of formal privileges. He believed that William was working against him behind closed doors. He felt used and discarded. He threatened that he would never again stand silently outside the family. These are topics that have been touched on in royal biographies and in Harry's own biography, so the story isn't all made up. It is a dramatic reimagining of the reported emotional realities with a constitutional consequence that has not in fact occurred. And that mixture is what makes it so powerful because when you read or hear this version of events, the emotional beats feel real, even if the legal structure is utterly made up. Harry feeling embarrassed, that tracks with everything he said in public. That fits with reports from various individuals over multiple years that Charles was trying to handle things quietly and every refusal cut both ways. William like a man who has saved the future and lost part of his history in the same breath. That's an interesting character note, whether or not any particular meeting took place. The problem here is that these emotive facts are being wrapped in a claim that does not exist in law, and the whole packaging is so smooth that people are buying the whole thing as true. What can actually happen to the line of succession versus what is being described? A king has no right to disinherit a person from the succession. The king can issue letters patent, a formal legal instrument which can alter titles and styles. There are limits to letters patent too. They can't overturn acts of parliament. The Succession to the Crown Act 2013 ended the disqualification arising from marriage to Catholic and switched from male preference primogeniture to absolute primogeniture for children born after 2011. That requires Parliament to act. The same would apply to removing a living person born into the line of succession. It would have to go through the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and get royal assent. It would be a big public procedure, not a signature behind closed doors, he said. And it would also have to be agreed by the other Commonwealth realms because the Statute of Westminster 1931 stipulated that changes to the succession have to have the assent of all the nations where the monarch is head of state. So we're talking about 16 countries, not one locked folder in Buckingham Palace. It is theatrical language, not facing the legal realities on the ground. to say the palace is signed off for good, that no apology can undo it, no appeal can reopen it, no future reconciliation can restore the official place. If Parliament can modify the succession by law, Parliament may change it back by law. In a constitutional monarchy, there are no permanent irreversible decisions. The whole system is based on the notion of parliamentary sovereignty. So the idea that Charles might make one choice that no subsequent parliament could ever undo is constitutionally ignorant. But again, that's not exactly what the story is about. This story does not claim to be legally accurate. It tries to be emotionally conclusive. What's genuinely noteworthy about the underlying situation between Harry and the palace is not the line of succession. It's all the other stuff. It's the security arrangements, the eviction from Frogmore Cottage, the loss of working royal status, the absence from official events, the removal of the HRH styling from the royal family website, the fact that Harry and Meghan's children weren't given prince and princess titles until after Charles became king and the rules automatically kicked in. All of those are real occurrences that have truly happened. They are on record, this can be proved, and together they convey a story of growing distance that requires no phantom sealed folders. Practically, Harry has been taken out of the functioning royal family. He's not on official business. He is not funded by the public. He's not speaking for the crown. That is correct, but that is not the same thing as being excluded from the succession. And that's where the story is deceptive, where the two are conflated. The line of succession is actually very straightforward. Harry is fifth in line behind William's 3 children. This has not changed. If you go to the official royal family website now, Harry is still in the succession. He's not on the list of working royals, but the succession and the working royals are 2 whole separate groups. It's one thing to ask who, by descent and parliamentary legislation, may conceivably inherit the monarchy. The other is who really does the job. Harry departed the job back in 2020. That was the entire purpose of the Sandringham Agreement, the Megxit deal, whatever you want to call it. He gave up state money, stopped doing official work, and went to live in another country. That was the taking away from the working arrangement. But it was almost 5 years ago. This is not something that just happened in a secret meeting in a dramatic fashion. So why is this story making the rounds now? Why do they care so much about the notion that Charles has finally done something permanent and irreversible? Much of it is just the constant appetite for royal drama with obvious villains and unambiguous repercussions. That Harry went too far, said something awful at a memorial ceremony. The palace had finally had enough and dropped the hammer. That's a satisfying story. It is closed, that's it. It puts an end to years of strain and makes sense of it. No, that doesn't bring the same narrative satisfaction as the messier truth, which is that Harry is still officially in the line of succession, but in practice totally outside the institution. It's not clear. It is unlocked. In theory, this may alter if relations improve. This is not quite as emotionally satisfying as the door being closed, the signature standing, and the royal destiny moving forward without Harry's name in it. But the other reason this story is going around is that it's something that people really believe in spirit, even if it hasn't happened on paper. All evidence suggests that the relationship between Harry and the rest of the royal family is badly broken. Public appearances together have been few and fraught. There is said to be limited communication. The trust is no more. And in a family where public impression and symbolic standing matter immensely, the emotional distance from the family's destiny is almost as important as the legal distance. Harry himself has spoken of feeling banished, rejected, unprotected. So when a story comes along that says the legal removal finally happened, it's confirming what people already feel is true. The facts don't have to be true for the emotion to seem true. That's the truly tough thing with royal reporting in general and this particular topic in particular. The barrier between recorded reality and emotional truth has been eroding for years. In his view, Harry's memoir, Spare, was emotionally truthful, but it also contained factual statements that were challenged or questioned. The palace's official declarations are full with factual claims that are technically true, but they leave out huge quantities of context. The biographies, the documentaries, the interviews, they all function in this area where feelings and facts are so thoroughly commingled that it's virtually hard to separate them out. And when a story like this one gets out, it reads the emotional temperature of the moment and reports it as a factual development. Charles feeling like he has had to choose between the crown and his son. Is Charles really signing a contract that erases his son? William feels the future on his shoulders and is told of the eviction ahead of the rest of the household. Catherine's urge to keep William grounded becomes Catherine warning him not to let duty make him cold. All these emotional dynamics are likely real, or at least reasonably real, given what we know. But the incidents described, the sealed folder, the second message, the confidential draft of the ceremony with the name cut out, these are story inventions to highlight the emotional reality. And look, dramatization isn't necessarily dishonest. That's what historical fiction does all the time. Netflix's The Crown does exactly this. It takes known occurrences, recognized dynamics, and fills in the secret discussions, the particular gestures, the important glances. The distinction is that the Crown is classified as a drama. People know its actors and scripts. This is portrayed as a news story, as something that has just happened, as something that viewers need to know about. That is a whole new category, and it counts because people are making judgments about real individuals based on things that didn't happen. So of course, let's talk about the precise aspects that are being used to make this feel authentic, since they're actually pretty nicely chosen. The thought of a courtier who, after the memorial service, kept Harry's words in a confidential document, and that message became the emotional spine of the succession dossier. That's a fairly detailed assertion that sounds like it originated from a leak. It is written like an insider's story. Problem is, if such a message existed and leaked, it would be a huge item in every credible news media. The palace would be in trouble. There would be comments, denials, confirmations, constitutional experts' interpretation. None of it has happened. This detail, on the other hand, is only there in this story, which is told to us as something we are only now learning. The suggestion that Harry's name was omitted from a private draft of a ceremony linked to future accession planning is also unfounded. If this were real and provable, it would be a front-page story. It would be the lead story on the BBC. It is not just not, but that it is not so strongly suggests that it is either contrived or that it is based on something so normal and procedural that it does not imply what the narrative says it means. Another extremely riveting scenario that if it actually happened would be a big development is the encounter between William and Harry that purportedly happened stripped of titles, stripped of advisors, stripped of every shield they had used against each other for years. The last known private encounter between the brothers was apparently at Prince Philip's burial in 2021, and by all accounts, it did not go well. If there was another meeting after that, when Harry told William that being taken away felt like being pronounced dead to the family, but yet alive enough to see them getting on without him, and William saying that he refused to go against the recommendation, that would be big. But it is not reported on outside of the storyline. There is no confirmation from any credible royal journalist. No source has stepped forward. It is totally inside the story being told. And that's really the heart of why this whole issue is worth looking at. Not if Harry is or isn't in the line of succession. He is, that's easily verifiable, but why do stories like this take off in the first place? Some of this is that the real royal situation is actually dramatic without any dramatization. You have a monarch and his little son who hardly speak to each other. You have two brothers and their relationship is so strained that they cannot be in the same room together. You have a family that is meant to stand for unity and continuity and stability, and they're obviously broken. That is a good narrative already. It doesn't require sealed folders and confidential notes and dramatic confrontations to be fascinating. But the frills have a function. They offer closure. They give a feeling that things is final, that the long sluggish slide is over. The truth is that the truth is less satisfying. The truth is that the situation is continuous and unsolved and might conceivably continue that way for decades. Another function of the embellishments is to give moral stances a clear assignment. In this story, Charles is sorrowful but dutiful, forced to choose the crown over his son. William is a wounded protector, bearing a burden he never asked for. Camilla is a caring person and she is attentive. Catherine is smart and calm, warning William not to lose his humanity. Harry feels angry and humiliated, lashes out, and then is crushed when the repercussions follow. Everyone has a part to play. Everything the characters do makes sense within the framework of the plot. The messier reality, where everyone has definitely made mistakes and nobody is simply right or simply wrong, is difficult to bundle into a captivating narrative. So the story becomes simplified. It takes complicated family dynamics and gives them a clear arc with a beginning and middle and end. And the end is the removal, the signature, the locked folder, the finality. But this is what really happens when you look at the actual timeline of events. In 2020, Harry stepped down as a working royal. The stipulations were set up in the Sandringham Agreement, which included the loss of military appointments and public financing. In 2021, Harry and Meghan did the Oprah interview, which worsened the breach further. Later that year, Prince Philip died, and the burial brought Harry back to the UK under visibly strained circumstances. In 2022, Harry and Meghan came back for the Platinum Jubilee, but were kept at arm's length from the main family activities. Later that year, Queen Elizabeth died, and Harry's connection with the family was plainly strained throughout the grieving period. In 2023, Harry came out with Spare, which was full of criticisms of William, Camilla, and the palace bureaucracy, and which in effect torched whatever bridges remained. The palace reclaimed Frogmore Cottage, the UK base. His legal wrangling about his UK security arrangements continued. There were some reported attempts at communication in 2024, but no meaningful reconciliation. Harry made a brief visit on Charles after his cancer diagnosis, but no noticeable thaw, and now Harry is still living in California in 2025. The family stays remote, and the line of succession is exactly the same as it was. And so if you actually look into the timing, that removal narrative doesn't match any place. There's no one moment when Charles signed something away in perpetuity. It wasn't a meeting where everything changed. What there is instead is a slow-growing alienation that has been going on in the public view for 5 years. Even if the name doesn't get erased, the relationship does. And that is perhaps the best way to grasp the whole scenario. Harry has been emotionally and practically shut out of the family's future. He's not going to have any real part to play in William's reign. He's not going to be on the balcony with the working royals. They're not going to ask him about the direction of the monarchy. He will not be trusted with the confidential family affairs. This is all true already, but Charles didn't have to sign a single document for any of it. So the question is, will the legal removal ever really take place? And the answer is very probably no. There's no reason for it. Getting Harry out of the line of succession would take the sort of massive legislative work across multiple countries that would generate massive controversy, be a distraction from everything else the monarchy is trying to do, and would pretty much change nothing that has not already been done through practical exclusion. Harry won't be king. Incredibly unlikely, but if something happened to William and his children, the constitutional crisis that would result is not something anybody wants to deal with. Much easier to leave the legal status alone and keep the practical exclusion. The monarchy is good at that. It is good at stripping all the meaning from formal structures. Harry can be fifth in line to the throne on paper and utterly inconsequential to the future of the monarchy in practice. Those two may go together, they do live together, and they will most likely stay coexisting for the rest of Harry's life. But what's so sticky about this whole story is that it plays on something real about how people feel family estrangement. That moment when the door slams shut for good, when the relationship goes from broken to dead, when hope finally surrenders to acceptance, that's a very strong emotional framework. Those who have experienced familial estrangement generally describe a similar arc. There's the fight, the trying to make it work, the repeated disappointments, and then eventually that moment when something shifts and you know it's never going to be the way it was. It may not be a formal declaration at that point. It may be no change in law at all. But it is real, it is awful, and it transforms how you understand your own life. The removal story takes that feeling and gives it a tangible form. The emotional moment of finality become literal is Charles signing the document. Eventually, every estranged person comes to the point where they read the cold phrase and realize it is permanent, and Harry experiences that realization. The story works because it is emotionally real, if not factually untrue. And that's the thing about royal coverage worth paying attention to. The fact's important, and we need to be clear about what actually happened and what has been imagined. But the reason the imaginary versions propagate is not simply a matter of gullibility or of unscrupulous journalism. That is because the versions imagined are conveying a story that individuals know from their own lives, or from their notion of how families work, or from their concept of how the world should function. Rules should be included in monarchy. It is meant to have consequences. If you openly attack the institution, if you publish a book revealing the family's private business, if you accuse your brother of yelling at you and your stepmother of leaking to the press, there should be a consequence for that. The removal narrative gives you that price. It says this is what happens when you take it too far. Here's the line, here's the penalty for crossing it. That is satisfying in a manner the confusing reality is not. But that is the murky reality we really have. Harry remains in the line to the throne. He's the king's son still. He's still the prince of the kingdom. He's also utterly outside the working establishment, alienated from his family, living in another country, and unlikely ever to return to any type of official role. Both things are simultaneously true. The monarchy has opted for pragmatic exclusion over formal expulsion, because the former is easier and less controversial and does the same thing. And Harry is left in a weird limbo, part of the structure on paper but cut off from it emotionally and practically. It's not quite as dramatic as a sealed folder and a final signature, but that's the truth, and it has been the case for years, and it probably will be the truth for years to come. The truth is not that Charles withdrew Harry from the line of succession. The reality is that the relationship between Harry and the institution of the monarchy has fallen apart so totally that a scenario about his legal removal feels instantly credible to millions of people. This is the real harm. Not a signature that never happened, but a loss of faith so deep that people think the signing should have happened or must have happened or will happen soon. The monarchy is only tenable if the populace support it. And when the public view of your family is that the alienation is so bad it probably needs formal legal acknowledgement, you've already lost something no piece of paper can ever recover.